First contact gone wrong. Dr. Sarah Chen stood frozen before the massive wall of monitors in the Arecibo Control Center, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. The signal pattern dancing across her screens defied every natural explanation she'd developed over 15 years of SETI research. "Martinez, are you seeing this?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. Her colleague rolled his chair across the room, the wheels squeaking in protest. "That's not possible. The signal's too structured, too perfect." The pattern repeated every 4.3 seconds with mathematical precision. It wasn't the random chaos of a pulsar or the steady drone of background radiation. This was something else entirely. As they watched, the signal changed. New patterns emerged, more complex than before. Then came the infrared readings, showing something massive decelerating in the outer solar system. Within hours, every major observatory on Earth had confirmed it. An object roughly the size of an aircraft carrier was approaching Earth at impossible speeds, bleeding off velocity in a way that violated several laws of physics. The world's government scrambled to respond, but before any consensus could be reached, a second object appeared, larger, more ominous, and it was pursuing the first. Dr. Chen found herself quickly recruited into a hastily assembled first contact team at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. The facility hummed with nervous energy as military personnel and civilian scientists tried to make sense of the situation. "The first vessel is damaged," announced Dr. Yuki Tanaka, head of thermal imaging. "Look at these heat signatures. Their propulsion system is failing." Colonel Rebecca Hayes, the military liaison, leaned forward. "And the second ship?" "Weapons hot," replied Captain Rogers from his station. "Every emission pattern we can detect suggests they're running combat systems we can barely comprehend." The first ship's trajectory suddenly shifted. It was heading directly for Earth orbit, specifically targeting the growing cloud of satellites and debris that humanity had accumulated over decades of space exploration. "They're trying to hide," Dr. Chen realized. "They're using our orbital junkyard as cover." The pursuing vessel slowed its approach, methodically beginning to sweep the debris field. Whatever they were looking for, they were willing to take their time to find it. The first real communication came 18 hours later. A tight beam transmission, carefully directed to avoid detection by the pursuing ship, reached the International Space Station. The message was simple: mathematical sequences, basic physical constants, and finally, images. The aliens aboard the first ship were refugees, fleeing from a species known as the Vrek. The Vrek, they explained through carefully constructed pictograms, were expanding through this sector of space, systematically conquering or eliminating any civilizations they encountered. The refugee ship, carrying thousands of civilians, had fled their homeworld just before it fell. They hadn't expected to find another civilization so close to their territory, especially not one that might be advanced enough to help. Dr. Chen worked tirelessly with her team to establish better communication. "They're asking for asylum," she reported to the UN Security Council via video link. "But more than that, they're warning us. The Vrek ship will find them eventually, and when they do, they'll find us too." Colonel Hayes finished grimly. "And we're not ready for that kind of fight." The refugee ship's captain, through increasingly sophisticated exchanges, explained that the Vrek possessed energy weapons that could slice through any known material, shields that could withstand nuclear detonations, and faster-than-light capabilities that made them nearly impossible to evade. But humanity had something the refugees hadn't counted on: desperation-fueled innovation, and a secret weapon in development that nobody, not even the refugees, would have considered viable. Deep beneath the New Mexico desert, in a facility that officially didn't exist, Dr. James Wong stared at his experimental quantum displacement drive. The project, originally designed to test theoretical methods of FTL travel, had been a spectacular failure. Every test had resulted in the target object being temporarily phased out of normal spacetime, creating what his team jokingly called quantum hiccups. But now, as he reviewed the test footage for the 100th time, he began to wonder if they'd been thinking about it all wrong. Maybe the failure was actually the weapon they needed. As the Vrek ship methodically worked its way through Earth's orbital debris field, Earth's scientists raced against time to repurpose their failed FTL drive into humanity's first line of defense. They had less than 72 hours before the Vrek would find the refugee ship, and when they did, Earth would have to be ready with a response that would either save them all or doom them to become the Vrek's next conquest. Dr. Chen looked up at the night sky, watching the distant glint of the Vrek ship moving through the debris field. Humanity had dreamed of first contact for generations. Now it had come, not with peaceful exchange of knowledge, but with the threat of extinction. Yet somehow, she felt a surge of hope. Throughout history, humanity had shown an uncanny ability to pull off the impossible when backed into a corner. Now, facing their greatest challenge, she had a feeling they were about to prove that capability once again. The breakthrough. The underground facility in New Mexico thrummed with activity as Dr. Wang's team worked to weaponize their failed FTL drive. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Their greatest scientific disappointment might be humanity's only hope for survival. "Run the simulation again," Dr. Wang commanded, his eyes bloodshot from 48 hours without sleep. On the main screen, a computer model showed their modified quantum displacement device, creating a localized bubble of distorted spacetime. Dr. Maya Patel, his lead theoretical physicist, pointed to a concerning pattern in the data. The energy requirements are still too high. We'd need a nuclear power plant to generate enough power for even a small-scale test. "What if we don't provide the power?" Dr. Wang muttered, mostly to himself. He pulled up footage from their earlier failed tests. "Look here. When we initiated the drive, it created a quantum resonance field. What if we could use an enemy's energy weapons against them?" Above them, in low Earth orbit, the refugee ship transmitted everything they knew about Vrek weapon systems to Earth's scientists. Colonel Hayes coordinated with military satellites to track the Vrek ship's methodical search pattern through the debris field. They had maybe 36 hours left, at most. At NASA Goddard, Dr. Chen worked with the refugee ship's engineers to understand their technology. The aliens, who called themselves the Orcs, possessed technological capabilities far beyond Earth's current level, except in one surprising area. Their quantum mechanics theories are primitive, Dr. Chen explained during an emergency briefing. They focused their development on conventional propulsion and energy weapons. They never pursued quantum displacement because their early experiments suggested it was impossible. Just like everyone said powered flight was impossible before the Wright brothers, Colonel Hayes remarked. Sometimes being too advanced in other areas makes you miss simple solutions. Dr. Wang's team had a breakthrough at hour 28. They discovered that by creating a precisely calibrated quantum field, they could use an enemy's energy weapons to power their own displacement effect. The more energy the Vrek poured into their attack, the more powerful the quantum displacement would become. "It's like quantum judo," Dr. Patel explained to the Joint Chiefs, using their own strength against them. "The problem is, we can only test this theoretically. We have no way to generate weapon-grade energy beams to verify it works." The decision was made to mount the experimental device on a modified satellite. They would get one chance, and one chance only, to make this work. If they failed, Earth would have no defense against the Vrek's inevitable attack. As the device was being prepared for launch, Dr. Chen made another discovery while analyzing the Orcs' historical records. "The Vrek aren't just conquerors," she reported grimly. "They're harvesting advanced civilizations for their technology. That's why they keep their victims' ships mostly intact. They're building their empire on stolen innovations." The countdown for the satellite launch began at hour 12. Dr. Wang stood in mission control, watching this as life's work, modified and crammed into a specially designed housing, rode a SpaceX rocket into orbit. "Deployment successful," came the call from launch control. "Satellite is maintaining position." Now came the waiting game. They had positioned the satellite near the refugee ship, hoping the wreck would target it first. The quantum displacement device, dubbed Project Reflection by the military, sat dormant, waiting for its moment. Hour 6 brought the first real test. The wreck ship, having cleared nearly 80% of the debris field, began moving toward their sector of orbit. The refugee ship powered down everything except life support, trying to remain as inconspicuous as possible among the artificial debris. Dr. Wong watched the tracking screen, his hands clenched into fists. Everything depended on the wreck ship firing its weapons at precisely the right angle and power level. Too much or too little energy, and the quantum displacement effect wouldn't properly form. "They're charging weapons," announced Captain Rogers. The wreck ship had finally noticed the carefully positioned satellite. "Energy readings are climbing." Colonel Hayes leaned forward in her chair. "Now we see if humanity's greatest scientific failure can become our greatest triumph." The wreck ship fired. The quantum displacement device activated. And for a brief moment, everyone in mission control watched as space itself seemed to hiccup. The energy beam from the wreck ship hit the satellite, and instead of destroying it, created a cascading quantum resonance that exceeded even Dr. Wong's most optimistic predictions. The space around the satellite twisted, folded, and then snapped back with devastating force. When their sensors cleared, the satellite was gone. But so was a spherical chunk of the wreck ship's bow section, as if someone had taken a giant ice cream scoop to its hull. The alien vessel, now venting atmosphere and debris, immediately ceased its attack. For several tense minutes, it hung motionless in orbit. Then, slowly, it began to retreat toward the outer solar system. "They're running," Colonel Hayes announced, her voice filled with disbelief. They actually ran. Dr. Wong slumped in his chair, exhausted but triumphant. "They've probably never encountered anything like this before. We didn't just hurt them. We did something they thought was impossible." The celebration was cut short by an urgent transmission from the refugee ship. The Orcs were warning them that the wreck never retreated permanently. They would return, and next time, they would bring an entire fleet. Dr. Chen turned to her colleagues, her expression determined. "Then we better start building more satellites, and maybe it's time the Orcs learned a little bit about quantum mechanics from us." Humanity had won its first interstellar battle, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the very human traits of innovation and thinking outside conventional boundaries. They had turned failure into success, and in doing so, changed the balance of power in their corner of the galaxy. But as Dr. Wong knew, this was just the beginning. The real work, preparing Earth for the inevitable return of the wreck, was about to begin. Unexpected allies. 3 months after humanity's first encounter with the wreck, the International Space Defense Initiative, ISDI, transformed Nevada's Area 51 into Earth's primary xenotechnology research facility. Inside a newly constructed chamber, Dr. Chen watched as an Orcs engineer named Kelvin, a simplified approximation of their actual name, manipulated a holographic display. "Your quantum displacement technology is elegant," Kelvin admitted, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with what Dr. Chen had learned to recognize as excitement. "We would never have considered using spatial distortion as a defensive measure. Sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected failures," Dr. Wong replied, sharing a knowing look with Dr. Chen. He had become something of a celebrity in the scientific community, though he seemed more interested in learning about Orcs technology than enjoying his fame. The Orcs refugees had proven to be invaluable allies. While their quantum physics knowledge was limited, their understanding of materials science and energy manipulation far exceeded Earth's capabilities. The combination of human theoretical innovation and Orcs practical experience was producing remarkable results. Colonel Hayes, now General Hayes and head of the ISDI, entered the chamber with a grim expression. "The long-range sensors the Orcs helped us install just picked up something. The wreck are coming back, and they're bringing friends." The holographic display shifted to show a cluster of dots moving through the outer solar system. 7 Vrek warships, including one that dwarfed all the others. A Dominance-class command ship, Kelvin explained, their bioluminescence dimming to a worried purple. They're not just coming to destroy us. They want to make an example of your world. Dr. Patel, who had been quietly working on calculations, looked up from her tablet. How long? 2 weeks, maybe less, General Hayes replied. They're moving faster than we anticipated. The news spread quickly through the facility. Earth had been preparing for this moment, but not everyone believed they were ready. The quantum displacement satellites, now dubbed Murphy mirrors by the troops, had been mass-produced and positioned throughout Earth's orbit, but they had never been tested against multiple targets. We need something more, Dr. Wong announced during an emergency meeting. The mirrors won't be enough against 7 ships, especially if they've adapted their tactics. That's when Kelvin made an unexpected suggestion. What if we combined our technologies, our energy manipulation systems with your quantum displacement theory? The idea sparked a flurry of activity. While the Orcs couldn't fully grasp the quantum mechanics behind the Murphy mirrors, they understood energy fields better than anyone. And their ship, though damaged, still contained functional shield generators and power systems. Working around the clock, the human Orcs team developed a new hybrid defense system. They called it the Quantum Wave Generator, or QWG. Instead of waiting for enemy weapons to power the displacement effect, it would create its own quantum distortions powered by Orcs energy cells. Think of it like creating a stone skipping across a pond, Dr. Patel explained to General Hayes. Except instead of water, we're making space itself ripple. Anything caught in those ripples will experience random quantum displacement effects. The challenge was scale. To defend the entire planet, they would need dozens of QWGs, and Earth simply didn't have enough Orcs power cells to make it work. That's when humanity demonstrated another of its unique traits: adaptation through necessity. Dr. Wong's team discovered that the principles behind the Orcs power cells could be replicated using modified nuclear reactors. The efficiency was lower, but Earth had plenty of nuclear material to work with. As the Vrek fleet drew closer, Earth's industrial capacity shifted into overdrive. Factories around the world were retooled to produce components for the QWG. The Orcs provided quality control, ensuring each piece met their exacting standards. We still have one problem, Dr. Chen pointed out during the final preparations. The quantum wave will affect any ship in its range, including friendly vessels. We can't evacuate the Orcs refugees while it's active. Kelvin stepped forward, their bioluminescence glowing with a determined red. We will stay. Our people have been running from the Vrek for too long. It's time we helped fight them. The Orcs refugees, despite the risks, began helping to crew Earth's defensive installations. Their experience with space combat proved invaluable as they trained human operators on what to expect. 1 week before the Vrek's estimated arrival, Earth conducted its first full-scale test of the quantum wave generator network. Satellites in orbit recorded the effect, a barely visible ripple in spacetime, like heat waves rising from hot asphalt, extending out to the moon's orbit. Beautiful, Dr. Wong whispered, watching the test footage. But will it be enough? Dr. Chen placed a hand on his shoulder. It has to be. And if it isn't, we'll think of something else. That's what humans do. The final days of preparation saw humanity united in a way it had never been before. Old rivalries were set aside as nations pooled their resources. The Orcs watched in amazement as a species they had initially dismissed as primitive demonstrated an incredible capacity for rapid advancement under pressure. As the Vrek fleet entered the inner solar system, General Hayes addressed the combined human Orcs defense force. They think they're coming to make an example of us. Instead, we're going to show them something they've never seen before. What happens when you corner a species that turned its greatest failure into its greatest weapon, and gave that weapon to a bunch of humans too stubborn to know when they're outmatched. The waiting game had begun. Earth's defenders watched their sensors as the Vrek fleet approached, knowing that humanity's first real interstellar war was about to begin. But they weren't facing it alone anymore. Sometimes the best allies are the ones you never expected to find. The test run. The Vrek fleet entered the asteroid belt like a spear thrown by a giant, their formation tight and purposeful. Earth's combined human Arxer defense force tracked their approach through a network of sensors hastily installed throughout the solar system. In the ISDI command center, General Hayes studied the tactical display. They're moving exactly as Kelvin predicted. The smaller ships are screened around the Dominance-class vessel. Dr. Chen watched the approaching fleet with a mixture of dread and fascination. The Vrek ships were beautiful in their own way, their hulls gleaming with an iridescent material that the Arxer had identified as a form of living metal. All QWG stations report ready, Dr. Wong announced from his station. The quantum wave generators had been positioned in a spherical grid around Earth, their combined fields creating what they hoped would be an impenetrable barrier of distorted spacetime. The first sign that something was wrong came when the Vrek fleet split into two groups. The Dominance-class ship and 3 escorts continued their direct approach, while the other 3 vessels peeled away on a tangential course. They're trying to flank us, General Hayes realized. They must have studied the quantum displacement effect from their last encounter. Kelvin's bioluminescence flashed with alarm patterns. The Vrek never split their forces. This is unprecedented. They're adapting, Dr. Patel observed, just like we did. The flanking group suddenly accelerated, their engines flaring with impossible power. They weren't heading for Earth. They were aiming for the moon. They're going to use the moon's gravity well to slingshot around our defenses, Dr. Wong shouted. The QWG field doesn't extend that far with full strength. General Hayes didn't hesitate. Activate the Murphy mirrors in lunar orbit. Deploy the reserve generators to strengthen the field in that sector. The next few minutes were chaos as humanity's defensive network faced its first real test. The 3 Vrek ships curved around the moon's far side, their trajectory precise and threatening. As they emerged, their weapon systems powered up simultaneously. The Murphy mirrors did their job, catching the first barrage of energy weapons and reflecting the power back through quantum displacement. One Vrek ship lost its entire weapons array to the effect, space itself seeming to swallow the missing sections. But the other 2 had learned. They fired shorter bursts, testing the defenses, looking for weak points in the coverage. And they found one. A gap between 2 QWG fields, barely large enough for a ship to slip through, appeared for just 3 seconds during the power cycling sequence. The Vrek exploited it immediately, one of their ships diving through the opening with precision that would have impressed any human pilot. Breakthrough in Sector 7. Multiple alarms blared as the Vrek vessel entered low Earth orbit, but instead of firing on the planet, it launched what appeared to be pods toward the surface. Boarding craft, Kelvin explained, their luminescence now a deeply worried shade. They're sending hunters. That's when Dr. Chen noticed something odd about the tactical display. The main fleet has stopped advancing. Why would they? Her question was answered as the Dominance-class vessel began to transform. Its sleek hull split and reformed, revealing what looked like an enormous energy-focusing array. That's a planet cracker. Kelvin's translator barely kept up with their alarmed bioluminescent pulses. They're going to try to overwhelm the entire defensive network with one massive burst. Dr. Wong's hands flew over his console. The QWG field can't handle that much power. It'll collapse. Unless, Dr. Patel looked up from her calculations, unless we reverse the field polarity. Instead of creating quantum displacement ripples outward, we turn the entire field inward. Create a quantum lens. Focus their own energy back on them. Dr. Wong caught on immediately. But the power requirements would burn out every generator we have. General Hayes finished. It's not sustainable. It doesn't need to be, Dr. Chen argued. We just need it to work once. The decision was made in seconds, As the Vrek boarding craft streaked through Earth's atmosphere, as the Dominance-class vessel's weapon reached full power, humanity prepared to gamble everything on one desperate counterattack. HFY field polarity reversing, Dr. Wong announced. Quantum lens forming in 5, 4. The Vrek fired their planet cracker. A beam of energy more powerful than anything humanity had ever witnessed lashed out toward Earth. 3, 2. The quantum lens snapped into focus just as the beam struck it. For a moment, space itself seemed to freeze. The energy beam stopped, caught in a web of distorted space-time that bent and twisted like a living thing. 1. The lens collapsed inward, sending the entire force of the planet cracker back along its original path, amplified by the quantum displacement effect. The beam struck the Dominance-class vessel squarely in its focusing array. What happened next defied description. The massive ship didn't explode. It imploded, collapsing in on itself as the quantum displacement effect turned its own mass against it. The resulting gravitational disturbance pulled in 2 of its escort vessels before the effect finally stabilized. In low Earth orbit, the Vrek boarding craft suddenly lost power, their controlling ship destroyed in the catastrophe. They fell from the sky like meteors, most burning up in the atmosphere. When the sensors finally cleared, only one Vrek ship remained intact, the one that had lost its weapons array to the Murphy mirrors. As they watched, it turned and fled at maximum acceleration, abandoning its mission and its fallen comrades. The combined human Orcs defense force had won, but the victory came at a cost. Every QWG in the network was burned out, their generators fused into useless masses of metal. The Murphy mirrors in lunar orbit had been destroyed by gravitational shear from the Dominance-class vessel's collapse. Well, General Hayes broke the stunned silence in the command center. I guess we're going to need to build more. Dr. Wong laughed, the sound tinged with exhaustion and relief. At least now we know they work. Kelvin's bioluminescence pulsed with a pattern that their translator rendered as awe. In all our history, no one has ever defeated a Vrek Dominance-class vessel. Your species continues to defy expectations. That's kind of our thing, Dr. Chen replied with a tired smile. Now let's figure out how to build these defenses better, because you know they'll be back. Let them come, General Hayes said firmly. Next time, we'll be ready. Ripples across the stars. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, as it came to be known throughout the galaxy, Dr. Chen stood in the observation dome of humanity's first genuine starship, the HSS Quantum Dawn. Below, Earth shimmered like a jewel, its orbit now dotted with the next generation of defensive installations. The Vrek Empire is fracturing, Kelvin announced, their bioluminescence rippling with satisfaction as they studied reports from their far-flung information network. News of their defeat has spread to every corner of controlled space. Dr. Wong, now heading Earth's Quantum Technologies Division, nodded thoughtfully. It's not just the military defeat that's shaking things up. It's what the defeat represents. He was right. The Vrek had built their empire on technological superiority, stealing innovations from conquered species and adding them to their arsenal. But humanity had done something unprecedented. We created something entirely new, something the Vrek couldn't simply copy and incorporate into their fleet. The quantum displacement effect requires understanding principles they refuse to acknowledge, Dr. Patel explained. Their entire scientific worldview is built on deterministic physics. Accepting quantum mechanics would mean admitting their fundamental theories are incomplete. General Hayes, monitoring the conversation from her new office at ISDI headquarters, added via holographic projection. Their entire society is built on the idea of inevitable progress through acquisition. We didn't just hurt them. We challenged their basic assumptions about how the universe works. The Quantum Dawn represented humanity's response to their new reality. Built using a combination of Earth innovation and Orcs engineering, it was neither the largest nor the most powerful ship in known space, but it was probably the most unusual. Instead of traditional engines, it used controlled quantum displacement fields for propulsion. Rather than energy weapons or shields, it manipulated space-time itself for defense, and, if necessary, offense. It was a ship that shouldn't work, according to every major spacefaring civilization's scientific principles. But it did work, and that changed everything. "We've received another request for diplomatic contact," Dr. Chen announced, reading from her tablet. "The Solaran Collective. That makes 15 independent species seeking alliance in the past month. The Orcs refugees had been the first to formally ally with Earth, their experience with advanced technology proving invaluable as humanity reached for the stars. But they weren't the last. Other species who had suffered under Vrek domination began reaching out, first cautiously, then with increasing enthusiasm. They don't just want our technology," Kelvin observed, their colors shifting thoughtfully. "They want to understand how we think, how we could take a failed FTL experiment and turn it into something that brought down a dominance-class vessel." "Human ingenuity," Dr. Wong suggested with a slight smile. "We've had a lot of practice at turning failures into successes." The Quantum Dawn shuddered slightly as its displacement drive engaged, beginning its first official diplomatic mission. They were heading to a secret meeting of species interested in forming what was tentatively being called the Free Systems Alliance. "The Vrek will try again," General Hayes reminded them. "Their empire is fracturing, but that makes them more dangerous, not less. They'll want revenge." "Let them try," Dr. Chen replied, watching Earth recede behind them. "We're not the same species they found hiding in our orbital debris field, and we're not alone anymore." She was right. In less than a year, humanity had gone from a pre-FTL civilization to a major player in galactic politics. Not through conquest or technological theft, but through innovation, adaptation, and the uniquely human ability to think outside conventional boundaries. The Quantum Dawn's quantum displacement drive created its characteristic ripple effect as it accelerated, distorting the starfield around them. Like those ripples in space-time, humanity's influence was spreading across the galaxy, changing everything it touched. "You know what the really interesting part is," Dr. Patil mused, watching the stars blur around them. "We're still just getting started. Every new species we meet, every exchange of ideas, opens up new possibilities." Kelvin's translator took a moment to process their next bioluminescent pattern. "You humans have a saying, 'Necessity is the mother of invention.' We're beginning to understand what that truly means." As the Quantum Dawn carried them toward their next adventure, Dr. Chen reflected on how far they'd come. From a single desperate defensive measure to a new way of understanding the universe itself. From hiding from the Vrek to helping forge an alliance that might reshape the galaxy. "That's the thing about humans," she said, watching the quantum ripples dance across space. "We never stop asking what if, and when the universe tells us something is impossible, we take it as a challenge." The ship accelerated toward its destination, carrying with it humanity's greatest gifts to the galaxy: innovation, determination, and the unshakable belief that failure is just the first step toward an unexpected success. Behind them, Earth continued its orbit, now protected by defenses that would have seemed like science fiction just a year ago. And in laboratories and workshops across the planet, humans continued to ask, "What if?" pushing the boundaries of possibility ever further. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly how humanity liked it.